and welcome to the Resiliency Connection. This is Shelley Plumb. Boy, are we excited for this show. This is an amazing show that we have, and we are going to be hyper-focused on trauma. Now, I know a lot of you out there have been through some trauma within your life, and I am no exception. I mean, I will share with you, I lost my mother when I was 7 years old in a car accident. And so it's interesting because when I talk about that, I almost liken my life to a puzzle. And I've learned that trauma for me personally, over the course of the years, trauma for me personally is something that loosens the pieces of my puzzle. And sometimes they fall completely out. So it's refreshing for me to come across individuals who are making a difference in the field of trauma, because they are the individuals, aren't they? They're the individuals that help us put those pieces of the puzzle back together again and get them solid so that our life is solid. We are honored today to have a trauma expert with us. We have Elaine Miller-Karas. Elaine is an expert in the field of trauma. She's also a clinician. She is an author. She is a co-founder of the Trauma Resource Institute. And if you haven't looked that up, you need to. She has actually worked with the Dalai Lama, and it's fascinating, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to work with the Dalai Lama? And she also has an amazing podcast, which I encourage you all to visit, and it is called Resiliency Within. So please join me in welcoming Elaine. Hi, Elaine.
Hello, Shelley. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is just a pleasure to have you on the show. So tell me, I must know, and viewers probably want to know as well, what got you interested in trauma?
I became a Lamaze teacher before I became a social worker. And as a Lamaze teacher, I loved birth and I loved being present when people were having babies. I was also a doula. And my first two classes that I taught as a very newly minted Lamaze teacher, there were two families that their babies died. And honestly, that the preparation I had as becoming a childbirth educator, we weren't trained. What do you say to families that just have lost their precious babies? And through a journey that I went on with a couple of the families, I founded in Santa Clara County, California, Helping After Neonatal Death. It was an organization that was first started in Marin County, and we took the idea and we started it kind of in my living room. And from that experience, I met so many amazing parents. I met people who had gone through so much to have their babies and who lost their tender ones. And they really taught me about grieving and how grieving is so different for everyone. But there's, really in our society still to this day, oftentimes not an understanding when you lose a baby due to a pregnancy loss, that it's still a baby to you, even if no one else got to know that baby. So that kind launched me into being an advocate.
Oh, so incredibly important. It's amazing. And this podcast, as I know you are aware, it's an offshoot of the resiliency that Joy Miller, has founded. And we're supporting all her efforts with this podcast. And the theme for this year, which you are going to be a speaker again, I'm so excited about that. But and we welcome you. The theme this year is connections. And for those of you out there that are watching this, we're going to put the link here to register for the program. But connections, Elaine, how does trauma relate to connections? Specifically, if we could start with our connection to ourself, how does trauma interact with that?
Well, let me say, first of all, that connection is at the core, how we connect to our parents, how they care for us when we're little, how we develop a view of ourselves as separate from our parents. So much of that has to do with how we're cared for and loved and supported, but some of us didn't get the advantage of that. So how do we create well-being for ourselves? Let's say if we didn't have that. So what I've learned is that we can create well-being. One of the things I love about Joy Miller, I often call her my sister with another mother. We have the similar last name, by the way. Elaine Miller-Karas and Joy Miller, right?
And
yeah, so
I've heard that.
Yeah, so I greatly appreciate her. But I think is that what else I've learned is that we can cultivate well-being, and that we are designed, as much as we're designed to experience the biological implications and the emotional and cognitive implications of trauma, we're also designed to heal. And we actually have resiliency circuits in our brain. Dr. Davidson from the University of Wisconsin has been doing amazing researching about the resiliency circuits that we have. For example, is that when we see someone being generous to someone else, when we are generous to someone, when someone is generous towards us, the same circuitry lights up in our brain, and that those pathways are being strengthened. That was always such a wonderful relief to me going, I'm the kind of person that cries at the Hallmark commercials, right? Why am I crying? It's not grief tears. But one of my native friends from the Central Coast said, Elaine, in our tribe, we call them sweet tears. And that's exactly what
Oh,
they
I
are.
love
Sweet
that. Sweet
tears. Yes,
tears.
wonderful sweet tears. Yes. Now
Yes,
they still taste salty, but they're sweet in
right.
terms of how we experience them. So we have the great capacity as human beings to start paying attention to our sensations of well being that help us then have more nourishing thoughts about ourselves, about our self image, to answer your question. Because if we only see ourselves from the lens of trauma, many people have said to me, I've heard all over the world, Elaine, you just need to know I'm broken. And I say,
Oh,
no, you're not broken. You're very human. And you're
yes.
so human that people all around the world have spoken these same words to me. But let me tell you about the science of how we're designed to experience those sensations that I know have been distressing to you, but how you can, with little bit of time, lay down new pathways to start experiencing more of what also is possible for you to experience your well-being.
Ah,
And then we
I
start having a different view about ourselves, right? Instead of being broken, we say, oh, I am a person that has a capacity to have greater well being, to be resilient, for example.
Oh my goodness, that is just, it gives me chills when you're talking. First of all, you have a very soothing voice. It's very soothing and very educational, and I'm convinced too, and that's why I salute you for what you do. Because when we're educated, when we actually know what is going on in our brain and why we're going through things, it's so much easier for me personally to manage that way. Speaking of, you were mentioning, just switching gears here, you were mentioning, what was it? A sister from another mother?
Yes, Joy
I
Miller.
have a
Yes,
quiz for you. Are you ready for a quiz?
sure. I don't know if I know the answer, but go ahead, give me
Okay,
the
you
quiz.
you probably know the answer to this one. I have brought on a mystery guest for you. Mystery guest, can you say hello?
Hello.
Oh, that's
Guess who
Joy
that is,
Miller's
Elaine?
voice. That's Joy Miller's voice. If I ever heard
Yes.
her.
Hi, Joy. How are you?
I'm very well. Hi,
Oh,
Elaine, my
thank you
dear
for
friend.
joining
Well,
us.
hello
I
there,
know
Joy.
you
What a
love
sweet
Elaine and you love her to
surprise.
the moon and back, and I wanted to bring you on to say hello. And do you have any questions for Elaine?
I do. I always have questions for her. So I'm curious. You mentioned cultivating well being and creating new pathways. So could you give everybody a quick overview of how you do that exact thing? How do you create
Well,
those
okay, I'm going to
pathways?
give you a little image, and that is of a garden. Now, most of us have seen gardens. We maybe had gardens in our backyards as we've grown up, and so maybe we're planting vegetables or we're planting flowers. But there's always those pesky little weeds in the garden, right? But some people tell me, but Elaine, weeds are also medicinal. But they still, when I want my flowers and my vegetables, sometimes I have to pull those weeds out. But let me say this. Let's say you planted your vegetables and your flowers, and you decided this year, well, I think, Joy, I'm only going to water the weeds in my garden. What will happen to the fruits and the vegetables? They'll wither, they'll die. They won't be, maybe they'll even survive, but they won't survive in a robust way. And the weeds will take over the garden. And so I think what sometimes we've done inadvertently in our society is we've so focused on the trauma and the trauma elements, we haven't opened our vista to look at what else is true. And so, what else is true is that we can tune our nervous system. And when I talk about tuning, is we pay attention to the positive experiences of our life and notice what happens inside. Interceptive awareness, if we can sense that on the inside, that actually is like pouring the water on the vegetables and fruits of our garden, but it's an internal garden. And that it reaps benefits for us, because not only does it create new pathways of well-being within us, and the more that we use it, just like if you're, going on a hike and you use the same path over and over and over again, you'll notice that that path becomes more distinct. And maybe there is another path there, but it's not there in the same way anymore. In fact, you can barely see it, although it may be faint. So that's called pruning. We're pruning away some of those other experiences or those sensations connected to those experiences. So we may not be as reactive, for example, when we have a reminder of a traumatic event, because we are working on cultivating that new pathway. That new garden is the way that I like to see it. Most people around the world have gardens, unless you're nomads. Then you don't have time to have the garden, but most of us know what that is. And so tuning and pruning becomes really important. I'm really also very appreciative of the work of Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. She wrote a wonderful book called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. It's very simple. She's one of the cutting edge neuroscientists. And she actually talks about this phenomena of tuning and pruning.
I love that. That is catchy too. That's one thing I love listening to you, Elaine, is you talk in such relatable terms, with some metaphors and stories. It really helps us to understand. So thank you for that.
Shelley, I have to tell you, the reason why I think this is one of the gifts that God has given me, I can distill very complex, neuroscientific terms and make it more relatable. I think I've been given that gift.
You do have that gift. I will concur with that. What do you think, Joy?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you really want to understand something at a deep level, you go to Elaine. You always
Yeah.
do.
That is so true. I have a question for the both of you. It was interesting because when I was researching for the show today, there was one question that kept popping up in my Google search, and it was about trauma. And whether the people were asking, with trauma, do we ever forget the trauma and then have it resurface at a later date? Can you answer that, Elaine?
Well, let me say a couple things. There's two types of memory. One is implicit memory, and the other is explicit memory. Explicit memory is like, oh, I remember what I had for breakfast this morning. Or maybe it's the memory of a traumatic event. Oh, that when I was, like when you said I was 7, and I remember the year my mom had died. So that's factual memory. It's autobiographical memory that you can call up with intention. But implicit memory is that memory that kind of floats in space. So maybe we're at the grocery store and somebody walks by us and they have a certain cologne on, and all of a sudden our body becomes tense. We have a fear response and we want to run out of the store. We don't even know why. But perhaps something happened to us before the formation of implicit memory, maybe when we were 1 year old, that had to do with that sensory smell, and that causes that reaction in our sensory system, and also the experience of fear, but we don't know why it's connected. So we may not remember some of our traumatic experiences explicitly. It's almost as if they get burned out of our memory circuits in one explicit way. But in the implicit way, in this kind of body memory, in this multisensory way, they can be sparked by a multisensory experience, a sight, a smell, a touch, that all of a sudden we're in this fear response connected to our trauma, but we may not even know what the trauma is that has elicited that response.
That is incredible. I mean, and I'll share with both of you just an experience I had last week. I was hiking and I was in Nevada, and we were with a guide. And it was an intense hike. It was very hot. And there was one point where the guide stopped, and Elaine and Joy, he was physically bothered. He was worried. He was sweating. And I asked him, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Well, forgive me if I have PTSD right now, but this is right here a point where last time I was here, I encountered 2 women who were hiking on their own, and they were visibly lost." He said neither one of them would accept my help, and I knew that they were in trouble, but they wouldn't. And he ended up going back to his car, calling the ranger, and by the time the ranger got to them, they had passed away. It speaks to what you're talking about, because he, even though it had happened in the past, he was clearly reliving it when he was walking with us.
Yes.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, and that might not have been in his consciousness when he started on the hike, but all of a sudden he saw the similar scenario, and there his body is sparked by the memory of these two women dying that he could have saved.
Yeah.
That's a very good example of it. And so that's what also, one woman said to me once because I had a trauma therapy practice for many, many years. She said, Elaine, walking outside my house there's landmines everywhere. I don't know where I'm going to step when one of them is going to just, knock me out of my zone of well-being. And then I feel like I have to retreat back into my home again. So what I want people to know is that you can learn to, okay, that is a sensation I have. That trauma happened years ago. And you can learn how to tell the difference in a sensory way of what are those sensations of well being and those sensations of distress. And how can I start to develop and tune, let's say, positive experiences or different practices that can start to dampen the reactivity of my nervous system when certain things remind me of something that was a very hard experience in my life.
Wow, that's amazing. It is, and you're speaking and just listening to your words and what you're saying. It's very clear to me that trauma can definitely affect our connections with the outside world, how we interact with the outside world. Joy, what do you think about that?
I think that, um, I'm resonating on the story that Elaine just said, and I also know that we have, as she said, the power to lessen the trauma because we're becoming more aware, and we become more acutely sensitive to know, okay, this smell reminds me of this. And I think the more you can put together, then you have more tools to be able to take the trauma and to look at it and not let it take over your life, but to understand it more and to be able to use it in a way that is positive, that helps you move through it. I think it's being open to the trauma, to let it, I almost to befriend it in a way to help you move through it.
Ah, that's fat. Yeah. No, I couldn't concur enough. I mean, that's it. It's really a fascinating topic. And so, Elaine, you heard me talking about the pieces of my puzzle, right? So, with trauma, if trauma is something that loosens in our puzzle pieces, are there any maybe 3 tips that you can leave our viewers with that helps them to deal with trauma in a productive manner?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is to know that you're not broken. Like what I said earlier, that you're human and that there is hope. And that is so important because so many people lose that capacity to experience hope. And I've learned that finding meaning and purpose, even when very difficult things have happened to you, can really lead to a whole new journey of not ever forgetting what's happened to you, but to know that there are other things. I often say this: what else is true in your life? To really contemplate some of those things. What else is true in your life? Yes, this happened, and then at the same time, this person came into my life, and this experience happened that also brought me joy and happiness. But I think that we've developed in the Trauma Resource Institute a set of wellness skills called the Community Resiliency Model. And we actually have a free app called iChill. We're in the process of updating it. It should be pretty much updated by the end of the month. And it has some very simple skills of how to develop the personal resources, how to start paying attention to this amazing sensory system of ours so that we can cultivate our sensory well-being, which sometimes is the avenue of having greater total well-being because of the trauma that lies in the body. But there's simple exercises called shift and stay, help now to reset now. I mean, they're very simple. And this is one set of tools that can be helpful. There's many more. And I guess I want to say too that if anyone tells you, oh, this is the only way, run to the hills. There's so many different ways that we can help with healing trauma. And sometimes one thing doesn't work for every person, but another thing might work for someone else. So you may have to go on a journey of finding different things that may help you. And it may include talking to a therapist, but it may not. It may be being involved in dance, or it may be doing art therapy. It may be doing something like I just talked to a dear person that Joy introduced me to, Michelle Hord. She experienced the tragic murder of her daughter, and she started a nonprofit called Gabriel's Wings. I mean, that will never take away the suffering of losing a child, but it also gives meaning and purpose to go forward in creating a memory that lasts, inside of you, of that person that was beloved to you, and doing good works that really has generosity and meaning that are threaded within it. So, I mean, there's so much more, but I guess that's my little short
Oh,
version.
I love that. And just, jumping off of that, from what I'm hearing from you is turning that pain into something productive, like Michelle Hord did. I completely understand. I think that's really wonderful.
Yes.
So you know what? This is really, it's been enlightening, this entire talk that we have been doing. And so for people out there that are watching this and they really want to connect with you, Elaine, maybe they want to watch your radio show or they want to read your books, where would you point them? What is the best way to connect?
TraumaResourceInstitute.com. That would have ways to contact me directly if they'd like to talk with me. I
Okay.
have actually my book in the background called Building Resilience to Trauma that's available through Amazon. It's in its second edition. And all you'd have to do is put in Voice America, Resiliency Within, and all my shows pop up. I've actually
Oh.
interviewed Joy Miller a number of times, and I need to do it again, too, before Resiliency 2024. Joy, I hope you'll come on.
That's right. Well, Joy, I can't wait to see you on her show too.
Yes. I guess there's one more thing, too. We do have the app called ichillapp.com. And we recently got some funding from a really wonderful source. And we only used to have English, Spanish, and Ukrainian, and we're adding Arabic and Hebrew and Portuguese. So we'll be adding more languages to reach more people, as we know that many people in the world are suffering right now and need different things that can be simple, that can help them cultivate their best self when the world can seem somewhat chaotic and traumatic.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Lane, from the bottom of my heart. I can't thank you enough for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Shelley, for asking me. And Joy, it's always a joy to see you. I know that's a redundancy, but what can I say?
And she is a joy.
She is a joy, yes.
And I love you so much, and I thank you for your wisdom. Thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. All
And
right.
thank you, Joy, for joining us. This has been amazing. And thank you all for joining us. This has been another episode of the Resiliency Connection. I'm Shelley Plumb. I'd actually like to leave you with a quote by the Dalai Lama. It reads, "When you think everything is someone else's fault, you will suffer a lot. When you realize that everything springs only from yourself, you will learn both peace and joy. Pride leads to violence and evil. The truly good gaze upon everything with love and understanding." Love and understanding. Those are two incredibly powerful words. And that little girl in me that lost her mother so early, those pieces of the puzzle that have been loosened are missing. I take personal comfort in knowing that there are resources like what Elaine offers out there. We're going to put the resources down below again. They'll be at the end of this video so that you can access them. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. We will see you soon.